Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome everyone to Polycarp's Paradigm. My name is Eric Robinson, and I have two very special guests with me, Peter and Taylor O'Brien. Welcome.
Thanks for having us on the podcast.
Yes. Well, I just wrapped up talking about the sacramentality of marriage with my friend Michaela last week on our Theology of the Body series, and next week we'll be talking about natural family planning and contraception, all of those things. And as Michaela and I recorded those episodes, we thought, you know what, this is going to be really good to have a Catholic couple that's actually living these values out and hearing from them. And so I thought of you all, and I'm so excited that you are willing to come and share your story with us. So
happy to share it.
Yeah. Well, let's start kind of from the beginning of your relationship. How did y'all first meet?
So, we actually met at a young adult day of reflection.
All right.
Yeah, it was just a little kind of half-day thing, and, I saw him from across the way. We were actually sitting across from each other, and apparently I gave him a sweet smile, he said.
That's right, yeah. We were,
Yes.
Yeah, I was at St. Michael's, and we were, sitting in a semicircle.
Yeah.
Kind of as... sort of like students in a classroom. There was somebody who was talking and presenting, and I was on one end of the semicircle, and Taylor was on the other. So we were like right across from one another.
And she gave you that look that you were like,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And we had even met before that, kind of earlier in the day.
Right.
We were doing some kind of like icebreakers where there were trivia questions, Catholic trivia questions. And,
nice.
And so you had like, what was it? Maybe some kind
of
like
a
bingo board, and so you had to ask people these questions, and if you got the answer from the person, you got to like mark your bingo, right? And so Taylor asked me one of those questions, and that's sort of the first time.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, and then we, after that, there were a couple people that decided to go out for drinks and, just like at a little wine bar down the street, and we were both there, and we ended up talking about, I guess, Holy Rosary, where I was going to Mass. We were both young adults. That Peter had just moved back to Houston. I had just moved to Houston from Louisiana, and he said, "Oh, I'd never been to Mass there before," and so we exchanged phone numbers. I mean, with some other people too. So
nice.
He wasn't going to make it too obvious. Although, then I guess a month or so later, he texted me and asked if I wanted to go to daily Mass there with him, and that kind of started this long, I say that it was long, I'm sure, I don't know if it was long to Peter, but this kind of every week we would get together for daily Mass on a weekday, usually like a Friday night, and then, after the first few times of doing that, we started going out to dinner afterwards, just like walking to a place down the street or grabbing a drink, and we would just talk for hours, and we really got to know each other that way. And that's when Peter broke it to me that he was quitting his job because he felt like he was called to the priesthood.
Oh.
Yeah. And at the time, I was like devastated. But I was okay, fine. We're going to be friends. It wasn't, meant to be, so to speak. And we continued our friendship. But then eventually, do you want me to tell this part?
Yeah.
Do you get it part?
So
eventually we were at dinner one day, and Peter... we're in the middle of a conversation. He says, "So I have never met anyone before that I could picture myself marrying."
Oh, no.
And then he says, "Do you get it?" And in my head, I'm going, yeah, I think I get it, but I don't want to make assumptions here. And so I said, "I need you to be more explicit." And that's when he kind of said that he had started thinking that maybe God wasn't calling him to the priesthood, and that instead maybe we were called to see if we were called to marriage. And that kind of started our relationship. And then we dated for quite a while, more seriously, much more intentionally. And then I guess you asked me to marry you a couple of years later in a parking lot.
Yeah.
So how many years ago was this when y'all first met?
Oh, 2014. It's 2019, so 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or was it 2013?
I think it was even 2013 because
yeah, so 6 years.
I had just moved back to Houston from Atlanta, and I was living with my cousin. She had a spare bedroom, and so I was temporarily living with her while, I was looking for an apartment of my own, right?
Yeah.
And it was also like a very important time in my life because I had just been coming from kind of a college atmosphere where I was maybe doing a fair amount of partying, and
yeah.
I had drifted definitely away from the faith. And,
You'd grown up Catholic, but okay.
Right, yeah. I had grown up Catholic, and I even maintained the practice of my Catholic faith to some extent in college. It really fell off junior and senior year.
Okay.
But I viewed my transition back to Houston as an opportunity to make a fresh start, which I was really excited about. And so, I was very intentional about it, and I made, 3 goals. So I wanted to keep it simple, right? And the first goal was to become close friends with Jesus, right? And so that was it was great because I was single. I was moving back to Houston. I didn't have any kind of ties with friends or any sort of obligations to go out and do things, and I was just starting fresh, and it was great. And so I found this day-long retreat, right, for young adults, and attended that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how it started, and it was really, I guess, fertile ground for me in my faith and just my openness to whatever God had in store for me.
Yeah.
Right.
And then how long were you in seminary?
I actually was not in seminary, so I was
okay.
I was discerning the priesthood while I was working, and felt a strong attraction to the priesthood.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was getting to know Taylor more and more, so it was kind of a tricky situation, right?
Right.
And eventually felt that Taylor and I had something that wouldn't be good to walk away from, right? And that we had a real kind of future together, and we would have a rich marriage together if we were to go in that direction.
But you also did go on a few come and see weekends and visit a few religious orders, because Peter decided that if he was called to be a priest, he felt much more drawn to, religious community than the diocesan priesthood. And so he did go and visit quite a few places, kind of when we were in that friendship stage, although secretly I was just in love with him the whole time.
Yes.
But I was trying to be cool
about
about
it. Get it.
Yeah, I was trying to be really cool about it, and I don't want to be a chalice chipper, But it helps that he was never actually in seminary. I don't feel too guilty.
Yeah, no.
But I that was actually one of the things that I loved about him, is that he was so willing to give his life completely to God and whatever God called him to. And that was so attractive to me. I just felt like this is the kind of person that I know is going to be a man after God's own heart, is going to be someone who, puts God first. And I knew that that's what I wanted in a husband. And that if God wasn't calling us to be together, that he was calling Peter to be a priest, he would be a wonderful priest, and that God must have somebody else for me, So, yeah.
And did you ever discern the religious life for yourself?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it. I thought about it quite a bit in high school. I thought about it at times in college. In high school, it really scared me. I was like, whoa, no way, God, don't ask me to do that. But then I became much more comfortable with the idea in college.
Okay.
I never felt as strong of a pull to it as Peter did. But I mean, I definitely did think about it. I feel like at some point, everybody kind of thinks about it if they really want, to do what God wants
to
them
just
to
be
do.
open to,
you have to get to that place of surrender where you just let go and say, whatever you want, God, that's what I will do. And that, to me, that was kind of liberating and helped me feel more at peace with the idea of marriage even, because it was I felt more open to both.
Yeah, yeah. So when he finally said, "Do you get it?" Like, I can picture us together. Was it pretty much like, okay, we obviously know we're gonna go towards the marriage route, even though you may not necessarily know, like, I'm definitely marrying this person, but I mean, so at what point in the stage or in the journey did you get that assurance of, like, I definitely know I want to marry this person, or I think we are going to be?
I mean, for me at least, it was a gradual progression. There was no one moment where I said, or a light bulb kind of went off, or it, say, hit me in prayer, right? Yeah. It was very gradual. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of just sort of how it's always been with me in decisions. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So yeah, it was something gradual that sort of evolved, and you continue to invest time in the mm-hmm. relationship, and it continues to grow, right? So yeah, that's how it worked for me, at least. I know that's kind of anticlimactic. But.
No.
Well, that's not how it worked for me, which Peter already knows this, so I'm not spoiling anything. But for me, I had dated a bit more than Peter had. Don't smile like that. But I'm just saying, like, I had more experience in, like, testing the waters with, like, mm-hmm. Good Catholic gentlemen, mm-hmm. And none of it ever really clicked or felt like quite right. Yeah. So in a sense, like, I had never met anybody that I could really see myself marrying. Yeah. And so for me, after having, I guess, just a little more experience in that area with, like, what a good relationship should be like, meeting Peter, a light bulb did go on for me, and I was like, no, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is actually exactly the type of person that I would, really want to marry. Yeah. And so I knew much more early on. I remember calling my mom and saying, Mom, I met someone, and I just think I want to marry him. And she was like, that is crazy.
And that was before he revealed the whole priesthood thing.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah. See, that was even way more devastating because you had already come to this conclusion.
Decided. Yeah. But, it's still with, like, a good level of detachment. You know, like, not... I mean, I wasn't, like, a crazy person. At least I'd like to think that. But, there was still, like, a healthy level of detachment, a healthy level of, like, surrendering to whatever God wants for us. But mm-hmm. I definitely could see a little bit more long-term than Peter could at that point, I think. Yeah. But there was a point when you did tell me that, I remember it was after Mike's going away party, and you said that you had prayed and asked God for someone, with XYZ, and that I was better than you had ever imagined.
Wow.
And at that point, I was like, yep, definitely in love with Peter. He can have a way with words sometimes.
Wow. Nice.
In a very sweet way.
Yes. And so once you crossed that threshold of proposing, she said yes. How long was your engagement? What was the marriage preparation like in the Catholic Church? Like, what did you have to do to prepare for marriage, and what were some of the thoughts as you were preparing for that?
Yeah, so we were engaged for, was it 5 months? That's it? I thought it was a little bit longer than that.
It was almost 6.
Almost 6. Yeah, so I guess we intentionally wanted a short engagement. Yeah. Once we had made the decision, we knew mm-hmm. that there was some preparation that we needed to do before we got married, but we didn't, I guess, see the need to maybe prolong the engagement so that we could wedding plan. Although, like, it was a compressed timeline, we had to do a lot, right? So, yeah.
And the church actually usually asks for, like, 6 months, but because we were getting married at what was at that point our home parish, we were both parishioners there. The priests already knew us. They were comfortable with mm-hmm. allowing us to do the preparation in 5 months instead of 6. And we pretty much got on it right away. But I will, not to interrupt you, sorry, Peter, but we did decide to do it, sort of at the 5-month mark instead of the 6-month mark because I'm a teacher and we wanted to do it in the summer so that we would have time for us to take a honeymoon mm-hmm. and not have to worry about me taking off of school or missing the beginning of the school year.
Yeah. So, that worked out, and the marriage prep really consisted of us meeting with a Catholic couple who were, probably in their 50s, mm-hmm. right? And so we would go over to their house, and we had sessions with them. Okay. And they were guided sessions, so we had this workbook that we would go through, and there were maybe, I don't know, 10 or 12 different sessions.
I don't know if it was quite that many, but yeah, there were a lot.
Yeah.
And they were really good.
Yeah, they were very good. The material was rich. We took notes, and they just shared their experience with us, right? So that was really, I guess, That was the main thing. But there were also, meetings with our priest. Mm-hmm. And then there are a few, required sort of things that you have to do from a legal standpoint. The church has to make sure that it's going to be a valid marriage. Yeah. So they have to confirm that you are not already married to someone, that you are there, of your own volition, and you're not being coerced or forced, things like that. So you do have to bring in, a witness that can attest to the fact that you've never been married and that you're not being forced to marry one another. We had to do a natural family planning class. We had to take sort of this, I forget what it's called, but it's this very long kind of survey about your personality, your preferences, your expectations for marriage. And then they, score it and essentially just bring up, these are areas where you are really compatible. And then these are areas that you're different. And so these are things that you should discuss before you get married to make sure that this really is a good idea. Because I think a lot of times people, think that they really love each other, but when they get down to what their expectations are in marriage, they're very different. And so, we were really blessed that we are very compatible on those most important things in life. But then there are a lot of other ways where we are very, very different. And, in God's great plan and design, those are ways that we complement each other because, and sometimes they are points of contention, but it helped because we kind of knew what those things would be going into marriage. Not just things you learn in your relationship, but things you can't really know until you are actually married. Like when you're living with someone, to be your own person for so long, and then all of a sudden, two lives become one life, and there are little things about the other person that drive you completely nuts. But you promised forever. And so I feel like the marriage preparation was giving us just a kind of this arsenal of strength, or even just, just good things to be reminded of, when times kind of get tough.
And so, it's, it's amazing to me. I've done a lot of studying on marriage, especially this summer with Theology of the Body and doing the series and everything. And growing up in the Protestant evangelical world, there usually is some caveats for divorce and remarriage. Whereas in the Catholic teaching, really it's taking Jesus as word. Like whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery, and that civil divorce actually doesn't nullify a marriage. Like it's not done. And so therefore marriage is indissoluble. Like it's for life. And even in worst case scenarios, yes, sometimes there's permission for separation in very terrible situations, but not ever divorce and not ever remarriage after a divorce. And so I find that to be, it is a hard teaching, but it's also one of the most beautiful teachings. So to talk about a little bit about how the indissolubility of marriage, knowing okay, this is the person, whatever happens, she is my wife. Whatever happens, he is my husband. That's just what's happened here because God is joining us together, and what God joins together, let no man separate. And so we're going to kind of put all of the cards on the table. No prenups, no anything like that, So share a little bit about how the church's teaching on marriage and how love and the vows even are free, total, faithful, and fruitful. And all of those things going into that. How did that kind of, feeling the weight of that almost either liberate you or scare you, or what did that look like for y'all?
Yeah, well, I think that because that was my mentality, and I know it was Taylor's mentality from the outset. It's probably been our mentality since we came to learn about it, right, from our parents and accept that. That just pursuing Taylor in our relationship for so long, that only would have happened. Basically, if there are any big red flags or things that we weren't compatible with or compatible on, or things that, would just indicate that it would not be a fruitful marriage or a good union. I feel like that would have prevented us from dating so long, right? Number one. even the marriage prep, I think, started earlier than after we were engaged. Father RB, who is Taylor's spiritual director, while we were dating, gave us a list of questions to go through. And he said, hey, if you're thinking about marriage, here are some good things that you should talk about, even before you get engaged, right? Just to see if you're compatible. Because I think when you're dating, it's easy to think that marriage will be like dating. And there are a lot of things that are different after you get married.
Okay.
A lot of things that change about your relationship, when you start living together. Things just kind of manifest that didn't have an opportunity to manifest while you were dating, right? And so you talk about some of those things beforehand and see, okay, where do we have differences, and are we able to reconcile those differences? And to be honest about that reconciliation, and not just to kind of breeze over it, thinking, the dating has been great on these fronts. We have a little hang up here. We haven't really resolved that, but it's just going to be fine. We kind of don't really need to address that piece, right?
It's like, no, we really do need to address that before we...
Yeah, you really do. And I think just the indissolubility piece of marriage, for me, when we were dating and, on our wedding day, there was no thought of, okay, if this goes bad, we can back out, right?
Right.
So, I don't know, that wasn't like kind of an earth-shattering concept to me. It was, once this happens, it's done.
Yeah. It's done forever. Right? I think that having, good formation in that area and having, the opportunity, just somehow God gave us, books along the way, to read and to open our eyes to theology of the body, or, just really, JP2's teaching about all of this. I just feel like that was huge for me when I was in college. And so I already knew what marriage required of me. Yeah. And so to me, it was very liberating. To answer your question, I was like, this is amazing because I'm going to marry this person, totally give myself to them. But at the same time, they can't fill me the way that God can. Yeah. That was like a very profound concept for me, that even though we are going to become one flesh, he doesn't take the place of God. Yeah. And I feel like that is one of the issues in today's culture, that people expect their spouse to be God in their life. They make their spouse everything. And no person can take the place of God. And so when we kind of had this understanding that no matter what, God is first for both of us and then each other, I don't know, it just, everything kind of fell into place, having the right order of things. And marriage didn't seem like this huge, scary thing. Yes, it was a big decision, and yes, we knew it was forever, but we felt confident in it because we knew it was required of us.
Yeah. And knowing that God himself is joining us together. Yes. Puts extra confidence in he's faithful. He's good. He's got this.
The graces of the sacrament. There are so many times when I've looked back and thought, if we had just been dating, this issue would not have turned out okay. But because we are married, the graces from our wedding day that we are still getting and that God continues to give us, those graces are getting us through a lot. Yeah. Marriage is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, but in a really beautiful way. I feel like our love for each other grows, even though we still have ups and downs. Our love is going higher and deeper, and so much of that is dependent on the grace that we're given when we hit those hard times.
Yeah. So what does that look like to draw from the grace of the sacrament now? Do you think about the vows? Do you think about the wedding day? Do you think about what marriage is? And are those some of the graces that you're thinking of? Or is it just I just feel a supernatural desire to give myself more to Peter, or to give myself more to Taylor? What does that kind of look like, or how does that manifest?
Well, I mean, we do talk about, marriage together, and I think that communication is huge. We're not always the best communicators. We both struggle to communicate effectively, but I think that in talking about things, we oftentimes kind of go back to the promises that we've made each other. Yeah. And, we tell each other often I choose you forever. I will love you forever. And, even if we're having a really hard time with something and it's a bad day and we're kind of irritable or we're fighting, it's like we bring it back to that.
Yeah.
And, Peter, and I heard a few years ago at a talk on marriage that the woman that was speaking, she was great. She said that she and her husband changed the way that they actually looked at the marital embrace at sex. And they said that they saw it as renewing their marriage vows. And that when you look at it through that lens, there's no lust in that. It's just this beautiful giving of yourself and receiving of the other person. And so even like in that area of our relationship, viewing that as a renewal of our marriage vows has been really good.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, just like when we were dating, we would go to Mass often together. We still obviously make time to go to Mass. We go every Sunday together as a family. And there are times when, we'll meet up and go to confession together, right, around kind of the work day. There are times that we've done Mass, for daily Mass as well. We pray as a family, not as much as we would like. So we have like a recurring like calendar invite to remind us on Sunday evenings to pray the rosary.
Do our family rosary. We do it most Sundays, but sometimes we have been changing it up.
Sometimes
lately.
we don't get it in, but those are like good staples that we try to keep in our life to do, like
praying together, teaching our son, about the faith, trying to pray with him too. Just like so much grace comes from prayer, laying in bed together at night, just, I always reach my little hand over and I hold Peter's hand and then he leads us in prayer. Like this morning when we woke up, we happened to wake up at the same time and it was not by our alarm clock named Damien. And,
Damien.
Peter just kind of reached over and said, let's start our day in prayer. And little things like that are, it's the little things that add up.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, one thing Michaela and I talked about last week on the podcast on sacramentality of marriage was that passage from the book of Tobit, from the scriptures that used to not be in my Bible.
It's only in the Catholic Bible.
Right. But it is the Word of God. And I just love the prayer that Tobias and Sarah pray together. And he leads it, and then she says the amen at the end. So I just wanted to read this for our listeners, and then if you all have any comments on it and how maybe this story has affected the way that you see things in your marriage. But so before they consummated their marriage, Tobias prayed this: "Blessed are you, O God of our fathers, and blessed for all generations is your name. Let the heavens and the whole creation bless you for all ages. You created Adam, and you created his wife Eve to be a help and support for him. From the two of them the whole human race was born. You said, it is not good that man should be alone. Let us make him a help similar to himself. Now it is not out of lust that I take this sister of mine, but with rightness of intention. Grant that she and I may find mercy and that we may grow old together." And they both said, Amen, amen. Tobit 8, 5-8. So how is that? Because I actually remember in college, I would get in arguments with my Catholic friends. I had two Catholic friends. And one of them, I asked him, okay, well, what's your favorite book of the Bible? And he said Tobit. And I was like, that's not in the Bible. But now I can totally see why, especially if you are someone who's called to marriage, because it's such a beautiful picture of that. And so how does that story influence you? How's that prayer? And so any comments there?
Yeah, so similar to Tobias and his wife, we pray every time before we renew our marriage vows. We'll kind of kneel next to the bed, and I'll lead Taylor and myself in a prayer. We don't say the exact prayer that Tobias prayed, but we make it our own, and it's generally the same every time. It's
similar
sort of
sense.
Similar. We pray for similar things, or kind of the same set of things, right?
Yeah.
And we found that it's been really beneficial to us. So beforehand we might be doing all sorts of different things. I might be doing some work. We might be doing some chores. We might have just put Damien down to bed, right? And so coming together in prayer beforehand is just a great way of entering with a kind of a blank slate and united to God and united together and reminding ourselves even of, of the commitments that we made and the vows that we made on our marriage day. I just find that it unites us beforehand, and it's just a great way to start. And
it invites God into that area of your relationship, the most intimate area of your relationship. It's like He is supposed to be there too. Yeah, even there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a holy moment, right? I mean, it's an incredible thing too, because another mind-blowing thing that I've learned since becoming Catholic really is that part of the marriage vows is to be open to life. And I remember talking to a priest right as I was about to get confirmed and confirmed in the Catholic Church, and we were talking about marriage and priesthood and all that. And he's like, well, the one thing I can't do as a priest it just amazes me that married couples do this, is that they are co-creators with God. And that just blew my mind, that like procreation, like you are literally like co-creating a new human being with God. You're providing the matter, He's providing the soul, all at the same time, basically. And so it is truly a holy moment. And so to pray through that and to invite God in is amazing. It's not like, He's the one that invented this whole thing. We could have had babies in so many other ways, but He chose to do it in this unique and amazing way that unites the spouses in that total gift of themselves, that reflects the Trinity, the total gift of themselves to one another, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And so let's talk about that a little bit more, about being open to life versus like frustrating the act and cutting it off from that life. How does that help you embrace this, or how does it help you see that it really is a total gift of yourself? And how did that affect your, going into the marriage of like knowing, hey, we're going to be open to God's action in our life. We're not going to do anything to prevent Him from co-creating with us, let's say.
So, I mean, we were really excited to have kids. I think that, so just for anyone listening, background, we got pregnant 2 months into marriage.
All right.
Which was, a blessing. We weren't necessarily planning it that way. We, thought we're just going to kind of see what happens. I didn't really know how easy or how hard it would be to get pregnant. And so, but we knew that we wanted to have kids. And so at that point, we were not really using even natural family planning to like prevent pregnancy, or to avoid pregnancy. But just knowing that, when you get married in the church, you are called to be open to life. That was super liberating in our relationship in that area, because there is no worry about like, oh, are we going to get pregnant? It's, if we do, what a blessing this is. And if we don't, like, it's in God's hands to bless us with a child when He deems fit. And I know that that's not everyone's experience. I know that there are women that long to get pregnant, and it is so hard for them. And so, sad when month after month it isn't happening. And I know that there are women who are really hyper fertile, and it seems like they just look at each other and they get pregnant, So I know that there are kind of two sides of the coin there, but for us, the idea of being open to life has just been nothing but a blessing, really, because it takes the control out of our hands and it puts it in God's hands. Now, that's not to say that you should not, like we do chart my cycles as, a part of that natural family planning, which natural family planning means that you are, using your natural cycle, the woman's natural cycle of fertility, to either achieve or avoid pregnancy, depending on what the couple discerns is right for them at the time, and they discern with God. But, we have only seen that as just good. It hasn't been a burden to us. It's only been a liberation, because it is out of our control, in as much as like God is either going to bless us with a child right now when we are renewing our marriage vows at a fertile time, or He isn't, and trusting that He knows best, not us.
Is that because I know with Damien, your firstborn, that you had to have a C-section, kind of an emergency one?
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of hard for women that have maybe multiple C-sections. It's like, okay, my body can only take
Right.
this so long. And
Right.
maybe like the woman says to herself, like, I'm scared because I don't want to have another C-section. My body's breaking. And I also, you know what, it's hard to chart my cycle. Like, it's crazy. And so what would you say to someone who might be in that situation, and how NFP can still be a blessing, like still being open to life, like not doing any surgeries or anything that would,
Right.
Maybe a vasectomy or anything like that would cut off God's action in that person's life, even though it would be such a hard thing to surrender.
Right.
But, what advice would you give someone kind of in that situation?
So I think that surrender is totally the right word to use there. It's an opportunity to, let go and completely let God have control of that, which is so scary, but he doesn't call us to be comfortable. He calls us to be faithful, and he calls us to let go of all of the things that we want to control, even that. And it does require a lot of trust to let go of that fear. And, we're in a place right now where we have only had one C-section, and we are able to have more. But I think the key is like finding a good doctor who really knows what they're talking about, especially like a NAPRO doctor who is, that's kind of the technology that is used to chart your cycles and to even look at what are the root causes of irregular periods or pain. Like I, in the past struggled with endometriosis, which, a lot of times keeps people from getting pregnant, gives them terribly irregular and painful periods, things like that. And, I went to a wonderful doctor that was trained at the Paul Institute, where they specialize in, NAPRO technology and the Creighton model. And she was able to simply look at my charts and everything I was doing to figure out, hey, you have endometriosis. Let's take care of this. And I would encourage, that woman, whoever she is, or any women struggling with this, to find a great doctor who knows about natural family planning, who isn't going to just throw contraception at them, who isn't going to say, hey, I'm too nervous to do another C-section, or, I think you should just get a hysterectomy or whatever. I think finding somebody who believes in this too, so that they can help you navigate it. And there are situations where they're going to say it actually is incredibly dangerous for your health to have another one. And I think that, the church isn't asking us to, die,
or have 20,
or
20
have
kids.
20 kids, there are, caveats. Like they do say that as long as you are not, trying to avoid pregnancy for like frivolous reasons or selfish reasons, like you have to have a really good reason. And from what I understand, and I could be wrong, if your doctor says, if you get pregnant again, like you will die, that is an okay reason to use natural family planning, where you are avoiding, sex on the days that you are fertile, that is an okay use for it. But it's never okay to use artificial contraception, because that does cut off, the spouses from one another and from, God creating life in them.
Yeah.
That's when you're taking it into your own hands.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Man, so Peter, any comments on how being open to life? I mean, I know like it's definitely seems like a lot more work on the woman's part in pretty much every way.
It is.
But any thoughts on your part as being a father now, and I guess one thing that I learned this summer too in studying theology of the body was just like the total gift of self. Once again, is like when the woman receives you, and not just you as you are in the present state, but also your potential fatherhood, and you receiving her in her potential motherhood. But all that also encompasses that total gift of self. And so, I don't know, being that it affirmed, I guess, of like, she sees me as a father, like as someone who can be a father to her children. Or how does that dynamic play into your relationship, and how's that helped you as far as this being open to life and that fatherhood aspect?
I guess for me, being open to life it's been easy, but I mean, again, we've only been married for 2 years, and our hope going into it was that we would, have a baby soon. That we'd have a baby early, right? So being open and not, having any kind of, I guess, temptation to avoid pregnancy was not a challenge for us or for me at least. And I was looking forward to being a father, right? And to growing in that way and to raising a child with Taylor. So, and then, after Damien was born, there was, I guess it was news to me, but Taylor was not, fertile for the time after Damien's birth when she was breastfeeding, right? So that was news to me. I thought that okay, Taylor would have her fertility back maybe right away, right?
And some women do, but a lot of women don't when they're nursing.
Right.
Part of this whole theology of the body, like God's design for the body. It'd be really hard to nurse 2 babies at once and to be nursing and be pregnant at the same time. Yeah. It's a lot for a woman's body. So. Yeah.
And so it ended up, we didn't have to say actively avoid pregnancy while Taylor was breastfeeding. So I think there was only one time when, Jamalka said, Taylor's doctor said, hey, you might be fertile. It hasn't been long enough after the C-section, so, you need to kind of hold out during this time. So that was really only one time, right, when we used your charting to actively avoid.
Yeah, it was one time, But, and I mean, who knows what will happen in the future and how many kids we'll have and, how the C-sections will go. Because I do have to have C-sections from now on just due to the complications with my first delivery. And I don't know what impact that is going to have on my health, but we plan to pray through it. And if we need to, talk to a priest about it just so that we can make sure we understand, what the church is requiring of us or asking us to do faithfully. But I do think that there is a fear on physicians' parts not to do more C-sections. I think if you go to a C-section specialist, it's different. We have some friends at church. They've had 8 C-sections. Wow. I'm part of a Catholic moms C-section group, and there are women on there. There's one woman that's had 13. There's another woman that's had 10. And so I know that God's not asking everybody to have 10 kids or 13 kids or even 8 kids, but that it's not like it's impossible. And so if you do find that you are kind of hyperfertile or you are pregnant again, it's not the end of the world. There is a medical professional out there that can help you. I know that some women, would be very afraid, and I would maybe be very afraid too, but there is somebody out there that can help,
Yeah. And can you see how, the beauty of the church's teaching on sexuality and the marital embrace, like how it would be very destructive to someone, let's say, who's not married but engaging in sexual activity, or like maybe some high schoolers or college students that are, engaged in that activity and using contraceptives or all that. And I don't know, I guess I really think that people long for this beauty, though, of authentic sexuality, authentic love. Sex belongs in the context of love, and love is life-giving. Love is total, it's free, it's fruitful, it's all of those things. And so what advice would you give to people that aren't married yet, and just to kind of paint a picture of how this really is beautiful and it belongs in this context, and here's why,
I mean, from kind of a practical perspective, it's to me, it's wonderful knowing that Taylor is the only woman that I've ever, ever had sex with, right? Yeah. It's pure. It's something that is just shared between Taylor and myself, right? And so it adds a great level of trust, I think, in our relationship as well, to know that, when I look at Taylor, I've only been hers and she's only been mine. Yeah. Right. And so I think it enriches the union
Yeah.
of our marriage.
And I remember being in, it was either late middle school or early high school, you know, I was in youth group, and I remember us talking about this at one point, and the way that it was explained to me, you know, by someone much older and wiser, was that it is so sacred and so holy that you are essentially opening up your soul to that person, and they are opening up their soul to you, and that you are giving, you know, a piece of yourself to them forever, and they're giving a piece of themselves to you forever. And then afterwards, you know, whether you like it or not, you've given a piece of yourself to them, and they've given a piece of themselves to you, and now you have this person in you forever. And, you know, of course, anything is possible with God's grace, you know, and his mercy has no bounds and no limits. And so, of course, if somebody has already made a mistake, made many, many mistakes, like, I would just encourage them to take that to the Lord, because he can do anything and he can heal anything. But that, like, just to really keep that in mind, that it is this beautiful thing that is so holy that you're actually, you know, there's like this very deep spiritual reality behind it, that does come out, you know, later on emotionally. Like, I've personally never met a woman that has said, I wish I had had sex with more people, you know?
That's so true.
Like, I've never met someone that said that, but I have met a lot of girls, and, like, you know, just in the course of the ministries that I've been a part of over the years, I've met a lot of girls and women that have said, I wish I hadn't had sex with all those people. I wish I had only waited for my husband. You know, I just think that, you know, people's mental and emotional health on these things just speak volumes. Yeah, there's nothing liberating. You know, there's kind of that narrative that it's, oh, so liberating for women to, like, exercise their sexuality. Well, there's nothing liberating about giving yourself away that creates a bondage that you don't want there to be later on in life. You know, what's liberating is knowing that I can give myself totally to this person and be accepted by them fully forever, that they love me just as I am, and that they are totally mine. You know, like, to me, that is so much more free and liberating and beautiful. And the other just seems like, you know, slavery isn't the right word, but that, you know, it becomes a thing, and it doesn't need to be a thing.
Yeah. That's so amazing. And to be in that context of a marriage that, you know, this is till death do we part. Yeah. And just that security and safety that it brings for that flourishing of love. I mean, I'm sure that goes into it as well, you know, and once again, open to life of, like, you're not scared to, like, and you don't view children as, like, a punishment. It's a reward. It's as the Vatican II Council says, the supreme gift of marriage is the children. And so, once again, you're co-creating with God for this new, unique, and unrepeatable human person. That there's never been anyone like this person before, and there will never be anyone like the person after. And you, as a couple, got to co-create with God to be part of that. I mean, it's so crazy.
Yeah, it's wild, like, looking at our son and seeing that.
Yeah.
You know, just knowing that, you know, he's half of my DNA, half of Peter's DNA, and that, you know, God knew him from the time the world began, and that, you know, Christ died for him.
Yeah.
You know, like, thinking about those things in those terms, like, you know, going back to scripture, you know, like, God knitting him in my womb, like, that's insane to realize that, like, that scripture is about us, just like it's about every family.
Yeah.
I don't know. It blows my mind. I look at him and I see a little Peter in him, and
yes.
You know, it makes me burst with joy every time. Every time.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Yeah. And just to know that, you know, we invested in our marriage for his good.
Yeah.
Right? And
that's huge.
That it's not just about you know, going back to the trust and the added level of trust by sort of keeping ourselves for one another. That's not just an investment in our relationship, but I think that you can even, I would imagine that you can see it bear fruit in your children and how they come up, right? I mean, I know that it was something that my dad shared with me about his relationship with my mom, and I just thought that was inspiring and a model to kind of strive after. And I could, when he told my brother and I that, I was able to kind of connect some of the dots between the peace and love that is in our home and his and my mom's, intentionality about that, right? That those two things came from the same source, right? And that, to me, that was just kind of another reason to follow that path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what have been some of the, let's say, crosses to bear in marriage? Because there's obviously some joys, lots of joys, but there's also some really difficult times as well. And so how have these principles, if you will, and like this view of marriage and this view of, and actually living it out, been helpful in embracing the cross when it does come together even?
Well, I mean, just like on more of like a superficial standpoint, like when you marry someone and then you are living with them, you discover things about them. Peter touched on this earlier, that you wouldn't necessarily be able to know while you're dating. And this is not, encouraging people to live together before marriage, because I don't believe in that. It's part of the adventure of marriage, getting to be with someone in such an intimate way, seeing them in the morning and smelling their nasty morning breath. No offense, Peter. But like seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, like naturally there are going to be things that come out and you realize, okay, like, hey, I was always raised to put things in the dishwasher this way, and you were raised to put them in the dishwasher this way, and both of us think that our way is the best way, but clearly, not both ways can be the best way.
Right.
So like, there's one right way. We have come
between the two.
Yeah, we've come to an agreement. Yes. But I mean, it's just little things like that especially as newlyweds, and I know that, as we are married for a longer time, we may have much bigger crosses to bear. It's inevitable that there will be suffering in any marriage, in any relationship, because that's life. That's the human condition. But, for a lot of our kind of crosses have been just those everyday little things about having to deny yourself and choose the other person, choosing your battles wisely. What's important to argue about, what's not? Yeah. Should I spend all this time and energy being right, or should I spend all this time and energy being loving?
Wow.
There's a choice there to be made every day. Do I choose myself or do I choose my spouse? I am really tired and I don't want to do X, Y, Z, but it would make my spouse's life easier today, so I'm going to do it. So I mean, that's a cross, but it's a joyful cross. Yeah. We haven't, we've been blessed to not have to face any huge sufferings together yet. But it's just the little everyday things of picking up your cross and following Christ. And we don't do a perfect job of it by any means, but it's part of, our vocabulary in a sense, the vocabulary of our relationship, to be thinking about it in those terms.
Because I know too, like Vatican II is emphasizing a lot on the universal call to holiness and how marriage is a really great means of furthering holiness, to further that perfection of love and that growth and sanctification. And so I'm sure you've seen even through the good and the bad that like, hey, this is sanctifying and this is like an opportunity to become a saint. And so, so if you want to speak a little bit about that.
It's a reminder that things go so much better when united with Christ.
Yeah.
So just as a practical example, our relationship is better when I am staying close to Christ. If I am not, in the habit of daily prayer, and I'm not striving after virtue, I'm much more likely to, get upset over the way that Taylor organized something, right? So I'm much more likely to let trivial things that really don't matter come between us. Yeah. Right? But when I'm maintaining that habit of prayer and I'm striving after virtue and trying to live like Christ, it's far easier to see things in their proper context. Yeah. Right. And to have kind of a long-term view of marriage versus the short-term, desire to control the situation and have things the way that I would prefer for them to be, right? And another, aspect to that is just choosing to be at peace in the home versus have things a certain way, right? Yeah. And just making that choice, right? I think the more you make that choice, the easier it becomes.
Right. And I read recently that God gives you the children that you need. You don't get to choose your children. Yeah. God gives them to you. And I think in a sense, he gives you the spouse that you need too. Like, yes, we did get to choose each other. But at the end of the day, we are married, and Peter is my path to sanctity, to holiness. And so any struggles that we encounter in our relationship, it's an opportunity to see that as an opportunity to grow in holiness. This is a chance for growth. This is a chance for me to practice virtue, to practice being a saint. And I, constantly am reminded of that when he's driving me nuts. I'm like, this is how I'm going to get to heaven. Yeah. And I'm how he's going to get to heaven. And I know that I've said that to him before. Well, I'm how you're going to get to heaven. So, but I just, every day I'm just so blessed by the way that Peter serves our family. People talk about, the 5 love languages, and I don't know if there are really only 5, but Peter definitely expresses his love for me and Damien in the way that he serves us, in the way that he takes care of us. And I think that those little things every day really add up and are helping him to become the man that God created him to be.
Mm-hmm. Right. I read a book, or at least part of a book once, that talked about, it was a book on marriage, and it talked about marriage being our most important career and actually viewing it sort of like a career. And I think a lot of us are career oriented, and it's easy to be career oriented. Whatever our work is, we want to be good at it, right? Right. And it's easy to measure your performance typically in the workplace against other people. There are ways of doing that, in the way that you get promotions and you get your bonuses. And there's kind of, at some places, even kind of a rating structure, right? And you can, based on your success in your career, you can see that manifest in your life, right? And so people like to kind of measure themselves in that way. But this book talked about how the most important career is the one that we have with our spouse, our marriage, right? Our marriage being the most important career. So just like maybe you get training for your job to get better, getting training for marriage, right? Through courses, through books, through spiritual direction. And what helped me about that book is to view it as an opportunity to be exceptional. Yeah. Right? As opposed to, let me mitigate the bad times, right? Yeah. Let's see how great we can make this. How great can I be at my marriage? Wow. How much can we excel together? Yeah. Right? And to sort of have a high goal to shoot for, and to make it kind of a joint effort together to achieve that great goal.
You started asking me, how can we make our marriage great? Yeah. Not just good, but how can we make it great? And it would open up this opportunity for conversation, to talk about, to sort of a family meeting in a way, and talk about, things honestly with one another. And it was really good. I really loved that he led our family in that way.
Wow. That's incredible. So wrapping up here, this has been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed speaking with you all. And but any just last comments, anything that we haven't talked about that you just I really want to get this out there, or any final bits of advice to people, maybe that are discerning marriage, or newlyweds, or about to have their first baby, whatever you can think of. Any last comments in the last few minutes here?
I mean, the one that comes to my mind is one that I have said before here, is just to always stay close to Christ, because I think in my own experience, everything is better where you stay close to Christ. It is the thing that kind of neutralizes the playing field and brings everything into perspective. A couple months without prayer can easily turn into a year, and a year could easily turn into 5, and a lot can happen in 5 years.
Wow.
That brings you to a point that is far different than the one you would have arrived at if you had been close to Christ during those 5 years. It's not to necessarily strike fear into people's hearts, but just to realize that how critical it is and how great it can make life if you stay close to Christ.
Yeah.
I would say just the thing that's kind of on my heart to share is women and men, but I think that women sometimes tend to have the feeling more, when they do feel called to marriage, that like it's this end all be all, that there's, that like real life doesn't begin until you get married. And I think that there were times, even when we were dating, that, I wanted to rush it and I just wanted to get there and just wanted Peter to realize it and ask me, but I ended up actually reading this book by Henry Nouwen called Life of the Beloved. And it was incredibly impactful on my life and the way that I viewed myself. Once I came to really view myself as God's beloved, it helped me realize that I didn't have to be someone else's beloved, that God could fulfill my deepest desires, and he could totally and completely fill me, and that gave me so much peace in my discernment process and gave me that freedom to like discern well, because then it wasn't like, oh, I need Peter. It's I want Peter. I choose Peter. And that really helped me. So like if there are any ladies out there struggling, I would say, with that idea of I want to be married so badly, I would say read that book, Life of the Beloved by Henry Nouwen, because, and I think men too, because I know guys that really want to be married and they feel so called to get married and they just can't find the right girl or whatever. I would say read that book because it was huge in just my discernment of marriage.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, Peter and Taylor O'Brien on Polycarp's Paradigm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi there, this is Christine Mooney Flynn, host of the Catholic Mama podcast, and I'd like to invite you to join me over on the Catholic Mama. To develop a Christian family and raise children who are, and who, God willing, will continue to be confident Catholics, requires us as parents to be confident in our faith as well. So each week, I dive into topics that help to make sense of the Catholic faith and how to live out that faith in our vocation as husbands and wives, moms and dads. So whether you need help in explaining aspects of Catholic doctrine like the real presence in the Eucharist, or if you're looking for practical ideas on how to live a more Catholic life, my goal is that you'll find the answers and guidance you're looking for over on my show, The Catholic Mama. I hope to see you there.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.